Please welcome our first speaker, Dr. Ho Wing Tong, Senior Manager, Medical Affairs from Mundipharma Pharmaceuticals Private Limited, to speak to us about discovering the 3Wh of a good antiseptic in dental practice amid the pandemic. Dr. Ho, please.
Thanks, Katie, for the kind introductions. Okay. So give me a second, I will just load my slides. Okay, so Katie, just to confirm, can you see my slide?
Yes, I can see your slides.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks a lot for joining these sections. So for the next 15 minutes or so, I will going to very quickly go through with you some of the key factors 3WH in for good antiseptics in the dental practice. Especially, I think the focus is definitely since we're in COVID-19 is a hot topic, so most of the focus will be around this COVID-19. So I think 3WH we know is why, what, when, how. So the first question is definitely, so why personal hygiene is more important than ever during these COVID-19 situations? And I believe that the reason is very straightforward, and all of us know. This is a statistic I brought from WHO on this morning, and we can see that the confirmed cases of COVID-19 worldwide already surpassed 40 million as of today, and the death is more than 1.1 million. So we are definitely in a deep in one of the most severe pandemics in the human history, and there's no way of easing off all the measures and the safety measures until we finally find a vaccine. So in Singapore, I think the good thing is the government have been doing a good job in curbing the transmission locally. So we are moving to phase 3, but even for phase 3, we can see that the approach will be very much calibrated because we see some of the countries after they start to open up, they actually got their second wave or third wave. And therefore, even though we are slowly easing out in Singapore, definitely we still need to take a lot of precautions. And definitely personal hygiene is one thing have been highlighted by a lot of different bodies like WHO or in Singapore, MOH, also highlighted a lot on the importance of personal hygiene. And why this is have been always been one of the recommendations by anyone in the world is because this is something very easily implementable. We do have available tools or agents currently, which could be used for maintaining good personal hygiene. And I will say this is one of the easy step aside from the safe distancing, one of the very easy and implementable step that we can do now until we eventually find a vaccine. And therefore, it's not surprising since the start of this pandemic in February, March, even until now, safe distancing measure and also personal hygiene, some of the key things have been highlighted against by different bodies and different NGO as well. So of course, when we try to manage a good personal hygiene, then it's come into the next question. So what makes a good antiseptics? Because hygiene and antiseptics definitely come hand in hand. In a lot of aspects, let's say we try to managing our good hygiene, for example, hand hygiene, respiratory hygiene. Of course, you can use the typical water or soap water or the typical gargle. But of course, selecting a good antiseptics will definitely make the work much more effective. So I list out some of the key criteria when we come into thinking about what is a good antiseptics. And I will say most people agree with 3 factors. So the first one is very important, is definitely have to be a good tolerability. Let's say a product is very good, but let's say it's not tolerable, then it sort of defeats the purpose because nobody will use it or nobody will actually comply with the treatment. The second, you have to be broadly effective, meaning that it should be broad spectrum, so we can eliminate as much germs as possible. This is a two-edged, so some people might claim because in certain type of infections, let's say you clear off the normal flora, you might actually encourage the bad bacteria to grow. But in terms of eliminating viruses, for example, in the COVID situation, let's say we need something for maintaining oral hygiene, it's not a major concern because no virus is good. So what we are looking at here is something as effective as possible, those with a broad spectrum antiviral effects. And lastly, of course, good antiseptic shouldn't also trigger any clinically significant development of resistance. The key concern, I would say, in antibiotics or antiviral alike is one of the key issues of discussions. So when we look at the different type of antiseptics, you will be quite surprised because a lot of time we just look at these disinfectants or these antiseptics. A lot of people might thought different type of the antiseptics might actually behave rather similarly. But let's say we pull out a chart and comparing it, all these antiseptics side by side, you will actually clearly see that some antiseptics is more effective than the rest, and some antiseptics actually do have broader spectrum comparing to the rest. And some of the key highlights you will see over here is that betadine or povidone iodine-based products actually is the one to have the highest efficacy across different types of germs, and also one of the most broad spectrums comparing to some other commonly used antiseptics, for example, like chlorhexidine or even alcohol. And the broad spectrums of povidone iodine is mainly contributed by its active ingredients inside the povidone iodine, which is the iodine molecule. So we know iodine is one of the most established antiseptic worldwide. It's very effective and it almost can kill anything come into contact with it. But iodine by itself is not that tolerable. Therefore, for betadine, we try to combine iodine with povidone. And the main idea is really to make it much more tolerable so that we can develop to some things more could be used. So the usage would be actually more, we can actually turn into a different formulations and actually make it to a different products. For example, like products like betadine gargle or sotro spray is quite impossible to manufacture it with iodine because iodine is very harsh on mucous membrane. So when we have this povidone iodine, therefore we can actually build the formulations for the oral use. And before COVID-19, we already, the products like betadine gargle already available in the market for many years. And of course, before that, the main purpose of people using betadine gargle is not really for infectious control, but it's more for oral and respiratory hygiene purpose. So I put a few studies over here, and over here, I think the first study I will share with you is when we use it as oral antiseptics, just to reduce the oral bacterial counts after you gargling. And this study actually is comparing it with chlorhexidine gargle and also the CPC gargle. And you can see that when we are trying to use betadine gargle to manage oral infection versus some others oral gargle, betadine gargle is the only one that could show a significant difference between the baseline bacterial count before and after gargling. While some other gargle, they might not be as effective. And you can see, according to this study, we can't really see that the clear or significant bacterial reduction effects. And beside the tender, the use of what we call betadine in the gargle in the tender settings, we actually do have thorough study, quite a number of studies in terms of respiratory hygiene. So in this particular study, we look at the use of betadine gargle in the patients with chronic respiratory disease. So what we can show that is when the adult patients started to use betadine gargle on a routine basis, the risk of them to capture these secondary infections because of their chronic disease actually reduced by almost half. So both of these studies, although it's in a different setting, that show that when you are using betadine gargle, it can help to control the infections, regardless whether it's a bacterial or viral infection in your oral cavity. And this is rather a convincing study, and due to and also due to the, as I mentioned earlier, due to the broad spectrum of the PBPI range products, it can actually effectively eliminate viruses, bacteria, fungus, and even some of the protozoa that causing harm to our health. And therefore, when the COVID-19 this situation started early of the year, our team also acted very quickly, and we have actually engaged this local lab in Duke NUS Medical School, and we try to confirm whether PEPI will be effective against this SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is the virus causing COVID-19. And without surprise, because as I mentioned, povidone iodine contains iodine, and iodine could almost kill anything come into contact with it. So this study actually confirmed our hypothesis that when we are using different range of our products like betadine, sore throat spray, gargle, skin cleanser, and antiseptic solutions, all of them could result in a significant follow-up reductions or 99.99% of cure rates of this SARS-CoV-2 virus just within 30 seconds of contact time. And this is actually aligned with the study that we already found in some other coronavirus variants, for example, SARS and MERS. Yep. So this actually confirmed the in vitro killing activities of PVPI against this SARS-CoV-2 virus. So with this good data on hand and rather promising, so I think the next question that people will ask, so when should we actually use these products? Should we actually use it on a routine basis? And how long should we do the gargling, or how long should we continue to use the products? So I will say that the use of this product, as I mentioned, is already have been used in many decades in a different setting. So for the maintenance of dental hygiene or respiratory hygiene. So in the COVID-19 specific situations, let's say we look at most of the guidelines or recommendations, especially in the dental channel, the recommendation is to actually use this kind of the very effective gargle as a pre-procedural mouth rinse. So meaning that on top of the hand sanitizing and wearing mask, the recommendation is that the patients and the treating doctors should actually gargle before and after the procedures, because by doing so, you can reduce the potential virus particle in your mouth, and reduction of the viral load in your mouth could further reduce the risk of transmission. Yeah, and this is something have been reflected in many guidelines worldwide, including in Singapore. So in Singapore, MOH actually recommend to use PVPI 0.2% to 1% of PVPI mouth rinse, to use it and gargle for at least 1 minute prior to the start of the procedures. Okay. So under the same guidelines, you can see there are some other recommendations, like for example, 1% of hydrogen peroxide and 0.05 to 0.1% of CPC. But again, so far, when we look at the literature, PVPI is the only one to have been shown direct killing effects against SARS-CoV-2 virus. Yeah. And besides using it as a pre-procedural rinsing, we do see that some other guidelines, including WHO guideline and the locally NEA guidelines, also recommend that we could use PVPI antiseptics as a surface disinfectants of the area, which is potentially high risk of the contaminations of this COVID-19 virus. So beside the pre-procedural rinsing, this is the other potential way we could make use of these strong antiseptics to further ensure our environment is clean and free of this COVID-19 virus. So lastly, I think towards the end is how, because I think I have shared with you on some of the key criteria of selecting a good antiseptics and how PVPI can play a role in it. So how would this actually protect our patient and our loved one? I will say that, of course, the best solution, as I mentioned in the at the start of my presentation, is definitely the vaccine, because as we talk about COVID-19, you read the news every day. I think one of the main discussion, of course, is on the vaccine. Yeah, but of course, we try to be optimistic. But let's say you follow the news for the past few days, there's actually a lot of concern over the COVID-19 virus, COVID-19 vaccines. Sorry, there are some volunteers actually died during the testing in Brazil and also in South Korea. It's not COVID specific, but some patients actually die after the typical flu jab, and all these actually might create certain phobia in terms of vaccination, especially when we talk about COVID-19, because all these vaccines developed will be actually rather new. So there might be a concern from the patients or from the general public that might refuse to get the vaccinations. And also from the authority, they might be actually scrutinized even further before they approve this COVID-19 vaccine. So in one way or the other, I believe that there's still some journey from now until we eventually get a vaccine available. So what's the next best thing that we could protect our loved one or actually affect ourselves and our patients? I would say that again, it's back to the basic. As I mentioned, what is easily to be implementable is actually maintain a good social distancing, and also maintain a good personal hygiene. And this is again, I think I couldn't emphasize enough. In the lack of the vaccine, in the absence of vaccine, I believe this is the next best thing we could do for now. And therefore, I think the good antiseptics like PBPI, the betadine range of product is definitely can play a part in it. And some of you might be aware of this. So because so far what I have been presented mainly is in the in vitro study, the in vitro killing effects of PBPI against COVID-19 virus. But they do have some clinical study ongoing worldwide to look at the specific clinical outcome when we are using PBPI-based products, and whether it will actually reduce the transmissions of this virus. So in Singapore, for example, we have this particular study leading by an investigator from NUH. And actually, this study already, as far as I know, is already completed. So and the result will be available very soon. But this is something that I believe we should actually very looking forward to. Let's say it's proved positive, and when with the use of PBI products can really reduce the transmission, I believe that then we will have another effective tool on top of what we already have to further curb the transmission of the disease. So with that, I will end my session here. So to sum up the bring home message, I think it's pretty straightforward. So PBPI range of products have been shown to be one of the most effective antiseptics because of its broad spectrum actions. And also I think experience, right, a lot of people already have been using it for decades in the use for maintaining dental and oral hygiene. Betadine antiseptics products, as I mentioned, already demonstrate there's an in vitro virucidal effects against SARS-CoV-2 virus just within 30 seconds of contact time. But of course, there are more studies, including the clinical study is still ongoing, and that's definitely something that we could look forward to. And lastly, even in the absence of clinical study or clinical outcome, we do know that PBPI itself is well tolerable. Let's say you use it, the chances of getting a side effect actually is rather low. The risk of side effect is very low. And therefore, you can see that in multiple guidelines, including the one in Singapore, people already start recommending to use PBPI as one of the way to improve personal hygiene, and also to be implemented as a pre-procedural mouth rinsing as well, so that it could further help to reduce the transmissions during these pandemic periods. So with that, I will end my session here. In case you have any questions on my presentations, or let's say you are interested to find out any of our products, you can actually feel free to reach out to us. The contact, our contact is actually here. So for any sales related question, you can reach out to Justin Chua, who is our sales manager for Betadine range of products. For any medical related issue question, you can reach out to me directly via this email as well. So thank you everyone for your attention. So going back to you, KB.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ho.